Warning, incoming game over. Warning, incoming game over.
What's going on? Game over Vancouver. A really entertaining matchup for us tonight. A bit of a rematch against our rivals in the Seattle Kraken. Coming away with a huge shootout victory. Lots to go over in today's game. So let's jump right into it and start with our usual Game Over sponsors. Hyperdrive Hockey, the flagship show of the Game Over Network on the Game Over Network channel. Hyperdrive Hockey, all things hockey across various leagues in multiple countries, whatever it is and wherever it is. Max, Daphne, and Kev have you covered for all your hockey news with a steady dose of fun fan engagement. You can find Hyperdrive Hockey on the Game Over Network YouTube channel or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts on the Hyperdrive Hockey page at thegameovernetwork.com. Let's get right into this one. Wow, nothing can just be a sole positive for the Canucks this season, it feels like. I mean, what an ending to the game. Canucks actually come away with the win this time. Of course, unlike their result last time against the Seattle Kraken. But it still does feel like that headline might be overshadowed by Thatcher Demko. But before we get into his potential injuries and some speculation, let's take a look at that game tonight. Ultimately ends in a shootout victory for the Canucks. 4-3 is the shootout victory score. Kevin Lankinen coming in clutch halfway through the game. He looked awesome. I thought the shootout was great for Vancouver. JT Miller opens it up. And honestly, I mean, if you start 1-0 in the shootout, it's just, I find it so hard for teams to come back from that mental pressure. But let's go back to the first period. This game started off, I was worried. Because how did last game start off? Okay, let's think back. Thatcher Demko let in one of the worst goals of his NHL career. All right, let's have a look at tonight's game. How did that one start? Yes, Thatcher Demko letting in one of the worst goals of his NHL career. Seattle come down the left side. He sees the shot all the way. He's squared up for the shot. He's ready. And somehow it squeaks past him. So I was a bit panicked after that first goal that we might not see Thatcher Demko being that good for the rest of the game. He was that good for the rest of the game. Ever since that goal went in, Thatcher Demko really locked it down for Vancouver. He made a ton of saves right away afterwards. You know, he went from letting in a really bad one to saving 2 or 3 that no one would have minded if he had let in. So that was really great to see. And just, if we're going to talk overall game notes for the Canucks, some players really stepped up tonight. As much as I don't always love what he brings to the team, Tyler Myers did have a good game. Kaja May is saying Tyler Myers for the heart. I'm not going to go that far. He nearly ended it in overtime just like he did last time. We're not just going to gloss over that, are we? Tyler Myers, in overtime, puts it right up his own slot, turning it over. I mean, the play ends up getting bailed out. No major chance registered on that play. But still, he was good. But again, it does show that you just can't run him as your number one D-man. And I mean, everyone knows that. But still a pretty good game for Tyler Myers. I'm not going to hate on him too much. But definitely, I see a lot of positivity. I'd reel it in a little bit. I didn't think he played that well. He played well. He played above. He put it this way. He played as well as he usually does in a 13 or 14 minute span for a 21, nearly 22 minute span tonight. So that is really, really great. But I don't know if I'd go quite that far. Looking at the defense, I did think that a horrible start for the Canucks. The first 10 minutes of the first period, not just for the defense, but everyone just looked awful. I mean, what a terrible, terrible start that the Canucks had. After 10 minutes, I was almost ready to turn off my television and go to sleep. It was an awful start. No one looked ready for tonight's game. But 10 minutes in, the Canucks get a lucky break. And you know what? Sometimes you need a lucky break to be able to get back into a game. The age-old saying of you got to be good to be lucky and lucky to be good. Bit of an awkward bounce in front, just a bit of a broken play. It goes off the defender. It winds up on the stick of Max Sasson, who bangs it home past the netminder. And definitely not a highlight reel goal, but they all count. And that felt like a bit of a momentum shift for the Canucks. Again, not a nice goal by any means, but it felt like, okay, you know what? We can get a goal. That's all we needed to do. We're right back in it. And from that goal onwards, I thought the Canucks really woke up again. But it was almost kind of the exact opposite of the last game they played against Seattle, where they played great for the first 50 minutes and fell apart in the last 10. This game felt like they didn't show up for the first 10 minutes, but they were able to bounce back and find a really strong second half of the first period, and that carried on into the next two periods. So after that goal in the first, not a whole lot went on after that tying 1-1 goal. Miller took a penalty. I thought the penalty kill looked really good. And my note here, Demko dialed in again after that first goal. Demko looked great. Moving on to the second, and my first note in the second period is an anti-Tyler Myers note. So Kaja, plug your ears. But he was on the power play because, of course, Erik Brandstrom substituted out of the lineup tonight, and I'll get to my thoughts on that decision. Tyler Myers flubs a power play shot, and it comes out of the zone. And I mean, we all know what Tyler Myers is in the offensive zone. He's got a big old cannon of a shot that he loves to try and get off. And Shorty with an incredible stat on tonight's broadcast that he had 12 shot attempts. That's a lot. It's a lot from Tyler Myers. 12 shot attempts, and of course he had one beautiful one. The rest of them, not so much. Still don't want to see Tyler Myers running my power play, please. And then the Demko heroics continued after that power play. Oliver Bjorkstrand, oh boy, you want to talk about a snake-bitten player. Poor guy. He had 3 breakaways in the game and got a shutout, a shootout attempt, and was stolen on all of them. He went 0 for 4 on breakaways tonight, and that first one from Thatcher Demko was great. Then the Canucks get a great chance the other way, a 2-on-1 where Pius Suter and Connor Garland completely fail to connect, and I'm thinking, oh, what a missed opportunity. Turns out it isn't so. Very same shift. The Canucks force a turnover in the neutral zone, spring Connor Garland for a breakaway. And this was something that I wanted to get into, was Connor Garland on the breakaway against Seattle. He is so deceptive. Man could lie straight to your face and you wouldn't know. It's incredible. He could have been a snake oil salesman back in the day. I'm telling you what, because his ability to fake out netminders is incredible. You think back to the game the Canucks had against the Seattle Kraken, obviously not last game, but the game before, where Connor Garland again had a breakaway goal. Last time, what he did was he sold it with his eyes. Of course, amazing camera angles in the NHL, and you can see his eyes bearing down on the breakaway. You see him looking to the top corners. So the goaltender anticipates him going high all the time. Winds up for a big old shot. Goaltender's thinking he's going high, and he just blasts it 5-hole. This time, it wasn't the eyes at all. Instead, it was the stick blade. If you look, such a minuscule pump fake to get Grubauer to go down. Just the tiniest little thing. But of course, NHL goaltenders are accustomed to releases coming off of the tiniest just tweaks of a shooter's shoulders or wrist. And so Grubauer sees that just little fake from Connor Garland, goes down, and gives him room to bury it on the forehand. I just thought Connor Garland, I mean, for a guy who doesn't necessarily have, a world-ending shot or the best deeks in the world, his ability to get goaltenders faked out is just incredible. And I mean, one of the biggest renaissance seasons in the NHL. I think that if the league had some sort of a trophy like the NFL does for a comeback player of the year award, I honestly think you could put Connor Garland in contention. Not that he had a bad year last year, but a very average, usual Connor Garland year last year. And then this year, oh man, I mean, he has just been an incredible player for the Canucks. The lifeblood of the team in many different shifts. And I mean, it was soon after that goal from Connor Garland where the Canucks had an incredible shift. 4 minutes of near consecutive offensive zone possession, broken up in the middle by Noah Juulsen, fanning a little bit, but credit where it's due, he was able to recover the neutral zone and deny the Seattle Kraken players changing a shift. And that kind of shift reminded me of the Sedin era, where it was just, even if the Canucks weren't scoring on a shift, it was amazing hockey to watch. It was a spectacle to behold, and you could tell that they were just slowly but surely draining the opposing team's stamina, and that's what the shift looked like tonight. Now, the shift started with a mixed line combination for the Canucks. Very interestingly enough, you want to know who that mixed line combination ended up being? Connor Garland, Dakota Joshua, and Teddy Bluger. The famed Canucks third line that was arguably the best third line in the entire NHL last year, who has not been reunited this year from Rick Tocchet, ends up getting reunited when on a split change I believe as the Garland line couldn't fully change. Connor Garland was caught out there with Joshua and Bluger, and it ends up being an incredible shift. I do not know why we have yet to see the reunification of that line. I do understand that Connor Garland has been playing so well. He's been a staple in the top 6. But at a certain point, how do you not go back to that line when they play as well as they do? I mean, honestly, it just feels like the obvious answer is to promote those guys. Screw it. Have that third line on your first line as opposed to running them with third line time on ice. I'd love to see them go back because that shift reminded you what the Canucks can be, where you don't even need your superstar players to be able to generate chances when you have forwards that work that hard, because that's what that shift was. It wasn't dazzling skill. The Canucks didn't dance around the Kraken, but what they did was they won every single board battle for a 2-minute time span until the Seattle Kraken defense was so tired they could no longer battle, and it felt like a Canucks power play because the lack of the formation break from the Kraken. They were just staying in formation. They weren't challenging for anything on the perimeter, just looking to break up the shooting and the passing lanes, giving up on the board battles. And when you can outwork a team so hard that they give up on defensive zone board battles, you have done something completely correct. And so I thought that was an awesome, awesome shift by the Canucks. However, I went out of chronological order there. I looked ahead to that shift because I wanted to skip over something that happened just before that shift. Just before that great shift from the Vancouver Canucks was when Thatcher Demko exited the game due to an apparent injury and did not return. So, if we're going to go into chronological order, let's talk about that injury for a little. Although Kaja May is saying keeping Alexiak on the ice for 4 minutes was insane. Yeah, crazy. Penny Alexiak's brother out there for 4 minutes was nuts. Nearly a 4:20 shift for Alexiak. And you could tell just nothing left in the tank. But let's take a look at Thatcher Demko. So, he goes down a little bit awkwardly after colliding with Noah Juleson. Now, these things happen. Let's not, put too much of the blame onto Noah Juleson. But also, let's not pull any punches. That is what happened. Noah Juleson takes out the legs of Thatcher Demko. He goes down and is very slow to get back up afterwards. And if you notice, when he's slow to get back up, the leg that he is not putting any pressure on is the same leg that he had injured all summer long. Is Thatcher Demko the goaltender of the future for the Vancouver Canucks? It feels mind-blowing to have this discussion because there is no question that when Thatcher Demko is on, he is honestly one of the best goaltenders in the league. I say this as a huge Connor Hellebuyck fan, I think that when Thatcher Demko is having his best game, no goaltender in the NHL can keep up with him. Seriously, you think back to that series against Vegas in the bubble. I mean, you think back to the amount of games where he single-handedly stole his high danger save percentage, the best in the league over the last 3 years. He is incredible. But how can you commit to a goaltender if he is now injured long-term? If he went out of the game tonight as a precautionary issue, maybe. But that didn't look precautionary. The way that he got back up, and the fact that, Kevin Lankinen played just 2 days ago, and he's going to be expected to play next game. You're not going to throw him in mid-game unless you need to, and it was tough. Karen Grobach saying, just speculating, but with knee injuries, it doesn't take much to re-injure them. No, exactly, and I mean, especially if you're a goaltender. And a goaltender with Thatcher Demko's workload. I mean, let's not pretend that the Canucks have a good defensive unit. I mean, straight up, I saw a tweet today saying that the Canucks' top 4 defensive unit tonight might have been worse than the Abbotsford Canucks' top 4 defensive unit tonight. And honestly, there's a case. I disagree, but there's a case. It's pretty close. And that shows just how bad the Canucks' defensive unit is right now, of course, with injuries. But my point being that does show just how much work Thatcher Demko was under. And so when you're being forced to work that hard, and especially when you're being forced to move horizontally that much, it's not good for a knee injury. And so when he came out, that's really worrying. And I mean, it's going to be so hard to commit to Thatcher Demko as the goaltender of the future. He's on year 4 out of 5 of his deal. So he's got a year left for this to kind of blow over and figure itself out. But what the Canucks don't have the luxury of is having Kevin Lankinen for another year. They are going to have to make the choice to sign Lankinen or not sooner rather than later. And it's a really tough decision because if you think Thatcher Demko is your goaltender of the future, then you can't really justify signing Kevin Lankinen to the kind of contract he is going to be signing this offseason. Not might, going to. There is no question with how he has played the last 2 years in Nashville and now this year in Vancouver that some team is going to give him a starting job, whether that's a full starter's job or kind of a 1A, 1B situation. He is not looking for a backup contract. He is looking for a starting contract. So, I mean, he's going to be asking for at least in the 3.5. That's probably light, probably closer to 4 or above AAV range. You're not paying that for a goaltender that's a true backup. So, I could see a world where the Canucks do that deal and run Thatcher Demko and Lankinen kind of split starts. But it's a big risk kind of thing because if Thatcher Demko does come back and you're running him for the Lions' share of the starts, then you've got a very overpaid backup. But I honestly don't see how the Canucks can let go of Kevin Lankinen. If you look at the goaltending market for this offseason, there's a lot of pretty solid backup options, but there isn't anyone that you would feel as comfortable starting a workload of, say, 40 games as you would Kevin Lankinen, because what Kevin Lankinen has given to the Canucks this season cannot be understated. It absolutely cannot. Without Kevin Lankinen, I honestly think that we would be talking about where the Canucks would be selecting in the upcoming draft. Ooh, James Higgins, Michael Misa, Porter Martone, Schaefer. We'll get more into the Canucks. Well, sorry, not the Canucks. We'll get more into the Canadian junior team later on in the show. But for now, I'm a Canucks fan. I don't want to think about prospects. I want to think about playoffs. But without Kevin Lankinen, it is no exaggeratory sentence to say that the Canucks would be looking at their draft options right now. Kevin Lankinen has saved this season for Vancouver. And if Demko is out for a long period of time, he is going to have to do it again. You guys remember the 1960s when goaltenders would just play every single game in a season? Kevin Lankinen, how do you feel about that? Do you want to just do that? You know how there was goaltenders that would just start every season for years on end? You know how Glenn Hall started, what was it, like 500 games in a row? Kevin Lankinen, I think you're going to do that for us, because I did not like what I saw of Artur Silovs in the NHL. I don't think Nikita Tolopilo is necessarily ready. Do we have anyone else? Did we reclaim Jiri Patera? Not a name I feel super inspired about. So I would really like Kevin Lankinen to start as many games as possible. And hopefully we get a timeline on Thatcher Demko pretty quickly here, because if it is something that's long-term, I just don't know how you could possibly commit to him as the goaltender of the future if it's long-term. It's impossible at this point. He has gotten so injured so many times, and it's just one of those careers that you look at and you feel sad, because you know that when he's on his game, he's a world beater. This is a goaltender that will steal victory out of the jaws of defeat. But if you're getting that kind of game 5 times a season total, you can't commit to a goaltender like that. You just can't. And as much as I love Thatcher Demko, possibly the most entertaining goaltender the Canucks have ever had, outside of the obvious in Bobby Lou and Kirk McLean, he might be the 3rd best goaltender in Canucks history right now. And if he can get his career back onto his feet, there's a chance he could fight for 2nd. Heck, there's even a chance he could fight for 1st. But as injury plagued as he has been, it does look like Kaja is correct. Vancouver is a goalie graveyard. So we'll see how that goes. We did reclaim Patera. I thought so, but I haven't heard anything about him from the AHL. So probably not a good sign. Feel like we would have heard more if he was doing well. Do you start Shilovs tomorrow against a weaker Nashville team? I think that obviously the Canucks will know the status of Thatcher Demko. Well, let's take a look quickly here at the Canucks schedule, because I know who they're playing against, but I don't know how many days they have off between games. So the Canucks play tomorrow on the 3rd, and then they play again on the 6th. So it's a 3-day break. You could conceivably start Lankinen twice, but he played tonight, and he played enough minutes that I think that, honestly, I like that take from Sammy Bains. I think that you could bring Shilovs up, And I think that for a goaltender that clearly lost his confidence at the start of the year this year in Vancouver, this could be a good game to get his confidence back against arguably the worst team in the NHL. By wins, they're the worst, not by points. What happened to the Predators, man? So it would be a good time to bring Shilovs back. And honestly, I like that take. Then you can give Lankinen the Canadians. But here is the issue. And this is why the Canucks did need to come away with some wins here. And they beat the Flames. They beat the Kraken tonight. So I really don't have any complaints. But the Canucks need to beat the Predators and the Canadiens because their schedule becomes so tough. And this is a tough schedule, which we are not expecting to have Hughes, Pettersson, Hronek, and now Demko. We're having significant lineup issues, and after the Predators and the Canadiens, Washington Capitals, Carolina Hurricanes, Toronto Maple Leafs, Winnipeg Jets, LA Kings, Edmonton Oilers. Those are all not just playoff teams, but playoff teams that have legitimate Stanley Cup aspirations. It's a tough schedule, and on top of that, that's a road trip too. So you're away. Now, Kevin Lankinen does seem to play even better away than he does at home. So maybe it's a good thing we're facing these teams on the road. But either way, it's a tough road ahead for Vancouver, which makes it all the more important that we have solid games against Nashville and Montreal. Although credit where it's due, Montreal really not a pushover team, starting to find their footing a little bit. And good for them. Talkit says Demko has back spasms. That would be, I would say, best case scenario. Back spasms, that's tough because it's a little bit more random than other injuries, but physio can get that sorted out much quicker than, say, re-injuring his popliteus muscle. However, let's not pretend the Canucks front office is honest about injuries. We all know they're not. So I'll take that with a grain of salt until we find out legitimate, kind of actual news. But if it is just back spasms, I think that's a good thing for Vancouver. Sounds like he, could be back this season. And obviously that would be a really good case scenario. But just with the kind of shadowy nature of this front office, I don't necessarily know how much I'm going to take them at face value. Not that I blame them for being kind of shadowy. So that was tough. Thatcher Demko going down in the second. However, Kevin Lankinen came in and looked great. I mean, he was tested right away. I thought the broadcast team made a really good point that it's incredible goaltenders don't get to warm up coming in through the game. Let them face a few shots. E-bugs get it. Why can't backup goaltenders? I mean, are we seriously going to pretend it takes that much time off the game? Wait, 45 seconds to a minute for a goaltender to get warmed up? I really don't think it's that much of a deal, and I think goaltenders should get that chance. However, Kevin Lankinen did not need it. He was incredibly tested right away. A quick shot from the right side. He was able to get his blocker up, and it wasn't the hardest shot he faced that shift. Once again, Seattle brings it back up top. Looks like they're going to go for the point side, but instead drop it off to the left, and Kevin Lankinen, his horizontal maneuverability is just incredible. Gets across to the right side of his crease to stymie the shooter on the left. Looked great. His maneuverability is incredible in the crease, and I really like what Kevin Lankinen brings to this team. I really think the Canucks have to re-sign him. I just don't think that you have any better options when it comes to backup netminders, especially if your starter is as injury-plagued as Demko is. You need a backup that is comfortable with a starter's load when the starter goes down. So I love what Lankinen's brought. I really, really want to keep him on the team. If you had told me in 2011 the Leafs would be better than the Canucks at some point, I would have laughed my rear off. Yeah, and it's been that way for a while now. Although, I'm not too high on the Leafs. I mean, every single season it's the same storyline. Wow, these guys are great in the regular season. I'm sure they're going to do something in the playoffs this year, right, guys? I want to see it first. Also, that's exactly how I feel about the Winnipeg Jets. I was called out for this take earlier on in the year, and it looks even hotter now. I still think the Jets are maybe going to win one round in the playoffs. I'm going to bet them to be out in the first round again. I think that is such a team that just cannot figure it out come playoff time. And I think the Leafs are in a similar boat. I think the Jets are quite similar to the Leafs in a lot of ways, not necessarily in terms of roster construction, but just in terms of every year there's a lot of hype around them, and then they fizzle out real fast in the playoffs. Connor Hellebuck, the most Jekyll and Hyde player of the last couple seasons at least. So I kind of got stuck on the second period there with that Demko talk. So let's get back to the third. Canucks power play. They got a power play right at the end of the second, came over into the third, looked abysmal. So I'm going to get into my talking point about the Canucks defense right now, because if I don't get to it now, I will go insane. It's been driving me bonkers. Why are we benching Erik Brannstrom? Why? I understand he's not the best defenseman in the NHL. I'm not going to say that he is. I understand he's not the best defenseman on the Canucks. I'm not going to say he is. But when Hughes and Hronek are out of the lineup, there is no question he is the best puck-moving defenseman that this team has. And you cannot possibly tell me that the players that are substituted in instead of Erik Brannstrom have been better defensively. You just can't. And I mean, okay, let's not put too much stock into JFresh cards, but everyone loves them, right? Shiny numbers, easy to digest for the viewer. Brannstrom sitting at 76%, and all of these defensemen I'm about to list, by the way, have very similar deployments, so these cards are accurate for these players. Brannstrom, 76%, Myers, 5%, Noah Juulsen, 19%, and Desharnais, 33% for wins above replacement. Now, I will say Tyler Myers is against elevated competition, so that 5%, a little bit harsh, I would say. But Brannstrom, in a depth role, has been better than 76% of defenders in the NHL. And I just don't understand why Tocchet has taken him out, because it's not like there have been any super egregious errors. I mean, certainly there have been some defensive lapses in Brannstrom's game, and again, I'm not going to say that there aren't, but there have been defensive lapses in everyone's game. And I mean, I just don't see how you can justify taking out the player that brings the offensive side of the puck for a player that just doesn't really bring any side of the puck. I mean, I didn't love Noah Juulsen tonight. I didn't love Goulet. And Kaja told me how to say his first name last time. It baffles me. Brisebois, didn't like his game tonight either. I mean, I didn't think either one was egregiously bad, but they are seventh defensemen being put out there. And I just think that Brannstrom is such an obvious pick to have on the ice. And when you look at who you could be taking out instead, there's so many players that I would take out instead. Let's look at the Canucks defensive core tonight. Brisebois, Myers, Soucy, Juulsen, Forbort, Desharnais. I'm taking Brannstrom over Brisebois. I'm taking Brannstrom over Juulsen. I'm taking Brannstrom over Desharnais. Myers, Soucy, and Forbort, probably not, even though, I have been so disappointed with Carson Soucy the last few games. But it is baffling to me that Erik Brannstrom comes out. And the Canucks power play just looked lackluster. Let's not pretend this power play had any legitimate threatening looks. It didn't. There was a couple chances where you thought they might get a chance, but chances to get a chance does not equal chances, and chances don't even equal goals necessarily. And I just thought, what are we doing? Tyler Myers on power play 1 in the year of our Lord 2025. No. I'm not watching this. That's insane. How does it happen? And also, Erik Brannstrom has been good on the power play. And it's just mind-boggling. I'm pretty sure he scored last power play. At the very least, he had a primary apple. It's just mind-boggling to me, where it's just Brannstrom has not been noticeably worse defensively than any of the players slotted in the lineup above him, but he has been so much better offensively. And I think especially in the second and third period, we saw some really unnecessary icing calls taken by players in their own zone that don't know how to move the puck. Looking at you, Desharnais. Looking at you, Juulsen. Just a really shocking decision. And I'm still on Rick Tocchet's side, but I will say I have now found every single game something to complain about with Rick Tocchet. Whether last year, none of that. This year it's just some really questionable decisions. And I'm going to say the second most questionable decision regarding a defender from a Canadian hockey organization. Hint, hint, Team Canada, but we'll wait till period 3 to get into that. I'm going to get into that, though, because, yeah, it needs to be discussed. Again, getting back to the third period, JT Miller, horrible penalty. Oh, sorry, that was after the Beniers goal. Beniers goal, I didn't really have any issues with that. It was just a nice bang-bang play by Seattle. My face cam is not working hard, just like several members of the team tonight. Let's see if I can get that one fixed. No, looks like I can't. Sorry about that. My face cam is fuzzy, just like my hockey opinions. So, yeah, Miller takes a bad penalty right after the Beniers goal. I didn't really have any issues with the Beniers goal. It was just a really nice play by the Kraken. A high pass down low to the left side, shot right in front, beautiful one-time goal. Yeah, really just no issues there. And I thought it was a great finish from Beniers, who really needs it. He's not necessarily having the season that you would expect him to have after signing a big contract and having the expectations of top 3 draft pick. Nice to see him getting a goal. And right after that, I was really, really miffed with that Miller goal. You take it 200 feet away from your own net, and it's not even like it's a penalty that you need to take. It is a minor stick infraction. I mean, really, Miller, what are you doing here? It's a hooking call, quite literally 180 feet away. Just not looking good. So I was really unhappy with that penalty taken by Miller. Thankfully, it didn't immediately lead to a chance for the Kraken. Well, that power play had chances, but the Canucks were able to fend it off. Some great saves from Lankinen, and some pretty good penalty killing. I didn't have any issues with PK tonight. I thought that the Canucks special teams power play looked lackluster. Penalty kill gave up some opportunities, but at the end of the day, if you're keeping the puck out of your net, I'm not going to complain too much. And then it was after that penalty that I had written down lack of puck movement from the defense, glaringly obvious. Because the Canucks iced the puck, I think 3 or 4 times in a span of 6 or 7 minutes. And it's just, that's too much. It's just not good enough. And many mistakes like that absolutely add up, especially at an NHL level. Icings sewer you. And we see that with how tired players get. If you're caught out there for a minute and a half, and then you ice the puck, there's a good chance you'll end up getting up to a 3-minute shift, and there's very few players in this league that can work really hard for a full 3-minute shift. After that, next major chance was Höglander getting a nice chance. Now, I don't know about you guys, this looked like a breakout game for Nils Höglander. Let's not beat around the bush. This has been an abysmal season for Hoggy. 24 goals last year, all even strength. Looked like an unbelievable player for Vancouver. Bit of a pest who would work hard along the boards and had a great finishing touch. Oh, this year it has not been great. He has not been able to come away with with anywhere near as many chances as he has been. But Höglander looked great there. Got a nice chance in tight, deep backhand. Stopped by Grubauer, but you could tell that Höglander had a great game just by his utilization on the ice. Rick Tocchet trusting him so much more. We saw his ice time skyrocket, I believe 5.5 minutes more than his previous game. I could be wrong about that. I'll have to double check those stats. But way more ice time for Nils Höglander, which was really nice to see him kind of earning his way out of the doghouse, including getting, I believe, the broadcast said it was his first overtime shift of the year. And looked pretty decent out there. So it was nice to see Höglander kind of slowly but surely working his way out of Tocchet's doghouse. I want him to be a solid player for us. I think he has the capability of being a solid player for us. I think tonight he showed, hey, he's still got the same tricks that made him the player the Canucks re-signed at a $3 million AAV. Hello, Mr. Wilkins. Welcome to the stream. And hey, Daniel, how's it going? I hope you're enjoying the stream. Hope you enjoyed the Canucks game. Of course, Daniel, great opinions in both hockey and heavy metal. So always great to see you in the chat. Hope you have been well, Daniel. Happy holidays. Always great to talk to you. Then the Seattle Kraken pulled the goaltender with about 2.5 minutes left, 2:40 to be precise. And you could just tell that this was going to overtime. It felt like the script had already been written. From the last game that went to overtime to now this one, it felt just, you knew it was happening. And sure enough, it felt like it really was following a script when it was Vince Dunn, too. Because, of course, it was Vince Dunn that got the 3rd goal and the overtime winner last time against Vancouver. This time, it's him who sends it to overtime with a long wrist shot through traffic. Another goal that I don't really want to put too much fault on anyone. More so a good play by the opposing team than necessarily a bad play by anyone on Vancouver. It's a long shot through a 5-man moving screen. Kevin Lankinen never even sees it. It's top corner. Just one of those goals where, yeah, a good team makes a good play and get a goal. Then it gets to overtime, and oh my, I was about to lose it. When I saw Tyler Myers starting in overtime for Vancouver, I'm just saying, oh no, this might not end well. But we win the opening faceoff, come away with possession, and all seems to be well in the Vancouver Canucks neighborhood. Myers brings it back to his own end. Looks like he's going to set up an outlet pass. Flubs it straight up the middle into a disastrous turnover. And thank goodness the Canucks forwards were able to get back in time and kind of help bail out Tyler Myers. I will say he did have a nice defensive effort on the shift after that bad turnover to shut down Seattle getting a chance, but goodness gracious. Overtime, I think, power play and then overtime are the biggest examples of why the Canucks desperately need Hughes and Hronek in their lineup, and Brandstrom, because they don't have players, defensive players, that can move the puck. Well, and that gave my heart a jump. Thankfully, it was able to be kept out. And then the Canucks got the best chance of overtime off Jake DeBrusk. I couldn't believe that stayed out. Really nice kick move by Bjorkstrand. When I was watching that in the replay, I was so impressed by that maneuver by Bjorkstrand. Jake DeBrusk gets around the goaltender, realizes he doesn't have room to tuck it short side, and the defender is on the opposite post ready to shut down the wraparound attempt. So his only major option is to throw it past the goaltender back out in front to Teddy Bluger. However, Oliver Bjorkstrand gets in the way. He is unable to get his stick to the pass, but manages to get his right foot in one fluid motion, kicks it away from Bluger to his forehand, brings it the other way. So a really nice defensive effort by Oliver Bjorkstrand, who was, again, just robbed tonight. He had 3 breakaways in a shootout attempt and couldn't get it going on any of them, but a nice defensive effort there. And then a couple overtime shifts back and forth. Lankinen, of course, Bjorkstrand's last breakaway attempt came in overtime. Lankinen stopped that, and then it gets to a shootout. And honestly, not a whole lot of negatives to take away from that shootout. JT Miller scores on his first shot. Kevin Lankinen, perfect. And I felt good about the shootout just based on, I don't want to diss Philip Grubauer, but that's probably the worst goaltending contract in the league, right? He can barely start at an NHL level. Honestly, he's more of a backup at an NHL level, making, $5.9 million, I believe, a year? More than Thatcher Demko, for example? That's tough. And so I felt like the Lankinen and Grubauer matchup, we had the advantage there. And sure enough, Miller opens up the scoring. Goes way out to the left, which I didn't like at the time. I was saying, my father and I sitting down on the couch watching that game, just saying, we don't like it when shooters go in and shoot the puck. What are you doing trying to go all the way back out wide? Nope. Lesson learned. Don't criticize. JT Miller knows what he's doing. Blast it past him. And then Lankinen shuts out all 3 shooters for the win. And that is all 3 periods, overtime, and the shootout. So to kind of put a bow on that, Canucks hockey's so stressful. It's so stressful. Because you want to feel good about it. Yay, Canucks beat a divisional rival in a thrilling hockey matchup that was both entertaining to watch and the team that I'm rooting for got the win. Thatcher Demko injured. So it's like, can you have one without having the other? Now, again, it does sound like Thatcher Demko back spasms. Again, you hope that is a minor thing, but the other one is just, again, how much do we trust Canucks front office to be truthful when it comes to injuries? I'm not sure I do. I'm really not sure I do. So I'd like to think it's back spasms, but the way he got up from that Noah Juleson hit, just, it looked like he didn't want to put any weight on that leg. And I mean, again, I'm no doctor. I'm sitting here, in my pajamas speculating about an injury here. But you never like to see an NHL player not putting weight on their leg. Just going to say that. Hopefully it is back spasms. Nothing more than that. Misses a couple games. Gets right back into the swing of things. Let's hope for that. Canucks and Rangers won today. Good for the Rangers. Talk about goaltending injuries. Igor Shesterkin out for the foreseeable future. Sucks for me. Have him in fantasy. That's not so good, but it's nice to see the Rangers. I mean, I don't even dislike the Rangers. I just like rooting on other teams that are downfall that aren't the Canucks, so that's nice. It's a shame with Grubauer ever since his injury and leaving the Avs, he's just been bad. Yeah, I mean, there was a time when Grubauer was a solid goaltender. There's a reason he got that contract. I think even at the time, most people said, wow, that's a risky contract. And it hasn't paid off. But yeah, he used to be a pretty solid goaltender. So I've had issues with back spasms, and they are debilitating. There's no issue that if he is having back spasms, he can't play. That's completely understandable. I just mean that in the long term, I would rather hear that he has back spasms than, say, re-injure his muscle that he was working on all summer. I do think it's a better case scenario. So let's talk a bit about the Canucks' future here. Let's look a little bit going forward, and let's move on to Period 2 here in Game Over Vancouver. And of course, Period 2 brought to you by our crowdfunding efforts here. Game Over Network is an independent production focused on community, inclusion, and quality people. If you're interested in supporting the Game Over Network, we have crowdfunding options available. In the description of this episode, you'll find a link to our Patreon page, and we're also working on a page through LaRouche, which is similar to Kickstarter, a crowdfunding platform for companies originating in Quebec. For LaRouche, we're aiming to raise $15,000, and if we hit that goal, we will gain access to government grants through the Government of Canada that will allow us to employ more people and produce more content across the Game Over Network channel. If you have any ideas for what you'd like to see as giveaways from these crowdfunding efforts, let us know in the comments on Twitter, Instagram, or our active Discord server. And once again, I always like shouting out the Discord. We always are chatting in the Discord during the game, screaming about what is going on. So if you'd like to be part of the active during the game discussion, do take a look at the Game Over Discord, and you can find my socials as well down below. On to the second period, looking forward to the Canucks' future. As we touched on earlier, two kind of softer games on the schedule before it really ramps up in terms of difficulty. Nashville Predators tomorrow night at 7 p.m. We'll see who starts that one. Of course, definitely supposed to be Kevin Lankinen. But after coming in tonight, we'll see whether or not they do go to Lanks or whether or not they feel more comfortable bringing up Seelovs for a game against one of the worst teams in the league. Predators have struggled mightily. There's no secret there whatsoever. This is a team the Canucks just really are not in a spot where they can afford to drop games to. Because yes, the Canucks are back in a playoff spot. Yay, that's great. Barely. Hanging on by a thread here. And I mean, if you look at the teams that are kind of fighting for that last playoff spot, it is a bunch of names that you don't necessarily on paper feel too threatened by. I mean, the Flames are 1 point back. You got the Kraken that are 7 points back now after tonight. And then over in the other division, the realistic wildcard candidates there would be Utah and the Blues. Of those teams, I think the one that scares me the most is Utah. But man, they are just so streaky. It feels like they are either on a huge win streak or a huge loss streak. So see what they can string together. But my point being that I don't think the Canucks' path to the playoffs is that hard, just based off of quality of competition. But they need that, because their roster right now is not up to snuff. And this is where I shall propose some changes heading forward. Once again, let's take a look at the lineup for tonight, heading into the game against the Seattle Kraken. So first line, Jake DeBrusk, JT Miller, Brock Besser. Thought it looked great. Brock Besser was called out by name and by Patrick Allvin in the New Year's interview with Ian McIntyre on Sportsnet. And I was shocked that that was the only guy he called out by name, because I didn't think Brock Besser has been even close to the guy who's been performing the least on the team. But ever since he was called out by Allvin, I mean, he's been excellent. I thought he had a really great game tonight, underratedly good game. That Tyler Myers goal was all Brock Besser. He won that board battle 1-on-2 on the near side, fed Miller below the goal line. Nice pass by Miller up high before Myers absolutely rips it. You sometimes forget how nice of a shot Tyler Myers can have sometimes. But anyways, great play by Besser, and I have no issues with that first line. Second line, PDG, Suter, and Garland. I like PDG. I like his consistency. You know what he brings, and he brings it every game. You just can't have him in your top six. I just really don't think you can. And then when the line is Joshua, Bluger, and Sherwood right behind, I pose to you, the listener, why don't you put Garland on that third line and elevate that third line to the second line? So in my mind, if the Canucks did this, it would be DeBrusk, Miller, Besser on the first line, then Joshua, Bluger, Garland on the second line, then PDG, Suter, Sherwood on the third. And I was fine with the fourth line. Leave that untouched. Höglander, Sassen, Heinen has actually been a nifty little fourth line for the Canucks. I do think Danton Heinen hasn't had the season that he was hoping to. I do think he makes a little bit too much money for what he brings. But I think that he's a quality depth option. And I think that him combined with Sassen and Höglander has been great. Max Sassen, a little bit of a time into the rough for Vancouver. I think that we heard a lot from Abbotsford about how much they trusted him. He said, okay, the ceiling, he's never going to be Connor McDavid, but he's a really safe player, does the details right and works hard, and I think that he's been an excellent fit in the fourth line. And tonight, the fourth line was buzzing, absolutely buzzing. And you could tell, because when the fourth line isn't buzzing, they sit. Rick Tocchet shortens the bench, at least for the forwards, not necessarily for the defense, but he shortens the bench for the forwards. And that was the opposite. He was really letting the fourth line play tonight. We saw a lot more shifts, and I think for good reason. Höglander, Sassen, Heinen looked great. So for me, the only changes I would make is I just think that the higher ceiling line is Joshua, Bluger, Garland, as opposed to having PDG and Suter in the top 6. Suter's not so bad in the top 6, especially as a winger, but playing center, I do prefer him a little bit lower down the lineup, considering how little practice at center he gets, given how often he is on the wing. That's the changes that I'd make up front. Of course, if you guys have any changes you'd like to see, put them in chat. Love to hear people's opinions on these sorts of things. On to the back end. Brisebois, Myers, Susie, Juleson, Forbort, Desharnais. Put Brandstrom in. Put Brandstrom in. I'm not taking a no for answer here, Rick Tocchet. Put Eric Brandstrom into the lineup. I don't even understand why he came out. I know I've already said this multiple times tonight, but seriously, it blows my mind. He was good last game. It just shocks me. As to who you take out, I mean, Desharnais didn't have a particularly bad game tonight. If you want to hold players accountable for playing badly, take out Carson Soucy for a game. We're, nearly 40 games? I believe this is game 39 of the year, and Carson Soucy has had, seriously, 3 good games. You can count them on one hand, that's for sure. So if you want to talk accountability, you can take Soucy out of the lineup, but I do understand why the Canucks wouldn't want to take Soucy out. I'd be fine with seeing Brisebois, Juleson, or Desharnais drop, but put Brandstrom in. What are we doing here? Luke Schenn returning to the Canucks. That would be a fun one. Another defender that I think is a little overpaid, but I love Luke Schenn. You know, that would be another great depth defenseman. That being said, the Canucks do not need any more depth defensemen. Please, if we're going to trade for a defender, please let them be someone that's quality, like a legitimate top 4 defenseman, not, hey, this guy can play top 4 on Chicago or San Jose. Brisebois hadn't played an NHL game since the 22-23 season. Well, we all know what Brisebois is for the Canucks. I mean, he's their, 9th guy. I mean, Brisebois is the guy that the Canucks say, you're just good enough to put into the NHL without being a disaster. Can you come up for a game when we have a ton of injuries? That's fine. That's fine. Put DPD in at this point. I would honestly not hate it. For me, the guys I want to see in are Brandstrom and also Friedman. Friedman's another guy that I don't understand why he seems to be in the doghouse as much as he is, aside from, I guess, he's just not that big. But other than that, another guy that, okay, hasn't been unreal defensively, but hasn't been worse than anyone else. And I think he does other things better than a lot of the Canucks depth defensemen. And I mean, I've pointed out in the past, Friedman he's an instigator, man. He is yapping his mouth out there. He is running it all night long. He's throwing checks. He does a great job of drawing penalties. And again, isn't, in my opinion, worse defensively. So if I was handcrafting the Canucks defense going into next game, I do not know the handedness of people off the top of my head. I really should, but I don't. So I'm just going to pick 2 defenders to take out here. But I'd like to see Friedman and Brandstrom come in. If you're just going to take one, bring in Brandstrom. I'm fine with Friedman sitting out, but I do think that he's better. I'd send Brisebois and Juleson down and bring in Brandstrom and Friedman. That's what I'd do. But again, we will see what the Canucks do. And I mean, I do think that there might not be a lot of changes heading into the next game. Coaches do like to kind of just run it back after a win, run it back. So we'll see if they do change anything, but I do definitely think that the Canucks defensive core held its own defensively tonight, but there was very obviously a disconnect between moving the puck from the defensive unit to the forward. And I think that, there are guys that can help with that in your roster, named Eric Brandstrom. Hughes Schenn pairing was my lifeline. Yeah, I really liked Luke Schenn. I just don't know how much of an upgrade he is. He's an upgrade, but I just don't know if it's worth it. If you're only going to trade for one defender, I don't know how much he moves the needle. By the way, I'm going to keep talking Canucks for a few more minutes here, but if you guys have any questions about the World Juniors today, please get them in, because the third segment, I'm steering the ship way off course. Game Over Vancouver is about to become Game Over Canada. I have to address it. I'll sneak some Canucks prospect talk in there so I can keep it just relevant enough, but gotta talk about the Canadian failure at the World Juniors. I believe it's the first time, well, no, not I believe, it is the first time since they reworked the way the World Juniors is seeded in 1993. It is the first time that Team Canada has been knocked out back-to-back in the quarterfinals. And they absolutely deserved it. There's nothing you can blame. I see people blaming officiating on Twitter. Shut up. They deserved that loss 100 times over. Pathetic from Hockey Canada. But I'll save my rage. Don't worry, there's plenty of it. There always is. But looking again to the Canucks, that's the changes I'd make. I would like to see Sealov start against Nashville. I do understand if they go to Lankinen. I think if Lankinen feels like he can handle a start tomorrow and then a start 3 days later in Montreal, you just ride him. He's so good. I love Lanks. So yeah, Vancouver looking pretty good. Now, the last thing I'm going to address before we move on to the third period and discuss international hockey is let's address the Miller and Pettersson rumors again. I mean, we do it every show. It's a little bit of a tradition in any sort of Canucks media, but there hasn't been a Game Over show since the Richardson clip dropped. Missing Curfew, big hockey podcast clip of Richardson, who played briefly for Vancouver. I believe he played about 40 games for Vancouver in the 21-22 season. So he was in the locker room at the same time as Miller and Pettersson. He said on the pod that Miller was too hard on Pettersson, saying that he loves Miller, but he is a quote-unquote effing animal out there and rides Pettersson too hard, and said to JT Miller, hey man, if you're too hard on this kid, you're going to lose him. I think we now know that he has been lost, and their relationship sounds very damaged. It might be irreparably so, and we're really starting to hear the rumors heat up. What to do? If the Canucks have to trade one, I think you have to trade JT Miller. If you trade Pettersson, the odds of it coming back to bite you are just so high. And I just don't know what you would get for Elias Pettersson that could possibly be good enough. Because the Canucks are in a window where they want to win now. They aren't trying to be good in a few years' time. They don't want a bunch of picks and prospects. They want to be good now. So if you trade Pettersson, I just don't think your team gets better in the short term. And then, of course, you're also scuppering yourself long term. Now, it's the same issue for JT Miller. But at the very least for Miller, I feel like you could maybe replace him a little bit more, just in terms of like, that contract isn't going to age well, I don't think. And I don't think anyone's really expecting it to. He's a physical power forward, and he's signed till he's 37. Those kinds of players tend to fall off in their mid-30s, but he's still incredible right now, and he will be for the next few years. Now, a really interesting point, Karen Krobach saying that I've seen a bunch of articles today saying they're open to offers for Miller. It's already been confirmed that the Canucks have had offers for both Pettersson and Miller, and they're listening to both. Now, listening to offers is like, that's a very, very loose term. Listening to offers just means you would consider it. And I mean, there's so few untouchable players in this league. I mean, seriously, probably a short list of 20 players or less that's truly untouchable. So listening to offers doesn't mean a whole lot, in my opinion. But I think what was a little bit more tangible is reports that Chris Drury, the general manager of the New York Rangers, is very much in pursuit of JT Miller. Now, of course, JT Miller was a New York Ranger. He spent many years there before going to Tampa. And had a fair bit of success there, of course, really broke out in Vancouver. Or, sorry, it was the other way around. Miller went from Tampa to New York, right? Shows how much I know. Anyways, but they want him back. And New York's an interesting one. New York is an interesting one because they have so many players that have just fallen off a cliff this year. But it is so risky to trade because in my mind, if you take a stab in the dark at someone like Zibanejad, at someone like K'Andre Miller, let's just throw wild speculation. I'm not even going to think about trade costs. I'm just going to think about the players, the main pieces moving here. It does sound like the Rangers offered a package that was centered around Mika Zibanejad. They added. So it was Miller going towards the Rangers, Zibanejad plus coming back to Vancouver. It's a risk. No, he did go from New York to Tampa to the Canucks. Okay, that's what I thought. I don't know why I double questioned myself. I don't know. I'm off my game tonight. But anyways, Miller for Miller. Yeah, and that's the thing is I think that the pieces that Canucks fans seem like they want to get the most are the pieces that are the riskiest. So the names that I see brought up the most are obviously Mika Zibanejad and K'Andre Miller. K'Andre Miller, I would say, is the kind of guy that I said, okay, I want someone that's a legitimate top 4 defenseman. When he's on, he's a legitimate top 4 defenseman. No one's going to question that. He's had a rough season. One of the only Rangers that's arguably had a rougher season than Keandre Miller? Mika Zibanejad. Now again, Zibanejad, no question about what he can do when he's on his game. He can be a legitimate first-line center in this league. But, oh man, have they fallen off. Zibanejad has had, I mean, what is, like, the New York Rangers are the biggest collapse in the league this year. It's not a hot take, that's just a fact. They were 2 wins away last year from going to the Stanley Cup Finals, and now I believe they're still last in the Metro. I know they won today, but has that changed things? They're tied for last in the Metro with the other New York team. All is well. The Rangers and the Islanders, tough, but at least the Islanders kind of expect it. New York Rangers, oh man, that is tough. I mean, what do you even do if you're them? You have to make a big trade to try to splash things up. So I do think that we could see a blockbuster. I really do. It would be insanity to see JT Miller or Pettersson traded. I mean, that would change the course of the franchise forever. Forever. It really would. It's hard to understate how big a trade would be with these players. I think it would be bigger than the Horvat trade. I think it would be bigger than... I'm trying to think of the most recent trade. I mean, okay, doesn't compare to, say, the Bure trade, but it might be one of the biggest ones since then. I mean, seriously, it's hard to understate how huge this is. Horvat was great. He wasn't Miller or Pettersson good. JT Miller and Elijah Pettersson, when they're on, are top 15 forwards in this league. To trade one of them would be monumental. So hard to imagine. It's just hard to imagine the Canucks winning that trade, though. Is the tough thing. It's a big gamble. So, Kaja, saying I'm a Rangers and a Canucks fan, how do you think I feel about this? Probably really stressed because that trade could sewer both teams. Because it's it's so risky. It really does sound like JT Miller's going to be traded. I mean, if he is traded, pour one out, man. Pour one out for one of the greatest Canucks to have ever donned the uniform. I'm serious, too. JT Miller's one of the best Canucks to have ever played for this team. If they trade him, I'm going to be so sad. I'll understand it. I will. But he's one of the best players to ever play for this team. He is such an awesome player. I mean, that playoff run last year where he was not just great offensively, but dominant defensively. He's fun to watch. He's skilled. He works hard. He's big. I love everything about JT Miller. And I think he's the exact kind of player you win with. I think he's a warrior. So I would really miss him. But at the same time, I just don't know that you can't. I just don't think you can trade Petey. And if you can't trade Petey, but you have to trade one, doesn't leave you with any other options. So I'd love Lafreniere. Yeah, I would, but I do feel like they would value him a lot higher because he's doing just well enough to escape the bust allegations of being a first overall. Not good for a first overall pick, but he's definitely starting to find his game. Braden Schneider would be a great return. No, I mean, there's no question that New York have a lot of interesting pieces, and they have pieces that the Canucks want. I mentioned that the Canucks don't want to send Miller or Pettersson to a rebuilder, or like anyone that's going to send them picks and prospects, because they don't need picks and prospects. But New York have the ability to offer players that would make a tangible difference to the Canucks lineup now. So I could see it. And I don't hate that idea. Now, I said to myself I was going to keep this show short. We're not even at the third period yet. We've just hit the hour mark. So I am going to move on to the third. I'm going to stop talking Canucks and move on to junior hockey. However, if anyone watching does have any questions about the Canucks, please put them in the chat and I'll get to it in the fourth. But we'll move on now to the third frame of play. And of course, that brings us to our merch, our wonderful, wonderful merch here. You can scan the QR code on the... What side of the screen is this? Right side of your screen. It's mirrored for me. I don't know no, I do. It's mirrored for me. And scan it to get some wonderful merch. Game Over merch, super comfortable. Not just saying that, I've felt it. Designed in-house by Brady Chalice from Game Over Winnipeg. Sorry, Brady Chalice from Game Over Winnipeg. Sorry, Brady. What better way to support something you love than by rocking it as clothing? Game Over's apparel line has dropped with 3 unique designs, Whether you feel the nostalgic pull of our retro skater design, whether you want to support goaltenders by the live and die by goalie design. I know a lot of you guys are goalie heads in the chat. Or whether you want to check out any of the sales we have. We've got a Boxing Day sale going on right now, so please do consider checking that out. I do have to double check when that ends. There's a small chance that's over. I'll double check. I think we still have Boxing Day sales on. Either way, you should get some merch. Really great way to support us financially. And again, don't feel like you have to support us financially. I really appreciate everyone that steps into the chat, puts in a comment, a like, a subscribe. I say this every show, but I mean it every show. We're a small independent production here. Casting from my bedroom, it's really awesome to be able to interact with you guys and talk about the Canucks on a media platform. And we've built a really great community here in Game Over Vancouver. So I really do appreciate everyone that stops by in any way, shape, or form. Means the most from the bottom of my heart. There's a lot of things my heart was feeling today. Moving on to the World Juniors. Canada eliminated in the quarterfinals against Czechia. I wanted to scream all year long. So I love junior hockey. I love junior hockey as much as I love the NHL. I work in junior hockey, not at a level where I'm casting any of the World Juniors players, at least on a regular basis. But I love junior hockey. It's so fun. Everyone just gets so into it. It's so invested. There's so much showboating between the players. It's such a fun tournament. What I've liked about the World Juniors in years past is it's best on best. You know what I mean? It is the best young prospects from every country looking to not just win for their country, represent their homeland, their patriotism, their flag, their crest, but also prove themselves to every single NHL team that has their eyes glued to this tournament. And this year, Hockey Canada let us down. No other way to say it. Hockey Canada let us down in a big way. I am not the first person to point it out. I will not be the last person to point it out. But what the actual heck was Hockey Canada thinking when they built this team? I mean, they left off genuinely 5 of their best, maybe 5 of their best 10 players. At the very least, 5 of their best 15. Incredible. No Zane Parekh. No Carter Yakimchuk. The offense from the defense, non-existent. Non-existent after Matthew Schaefer went down. Now, it was really unfortunate Matthew Schaefer went down. I do think he's the best Canadian defenseman, and I do think he's actually better offensive. Well, at the very least, as good offensively as Parekh and Yakimchuk. He's great. He is an amazing two-way player. I think he could end up having a Pronger-esque career if he can hit his peak. But he went down earlier on in the tournament with a broken collarbone. Hockey Canada gets a lifeline. When one player goes down, you get to take another from the selection committee. Carter Yakimchuk actually never even made the extended roster list, so they couldn't have selected him. But you know who did? Zane Parekh. So I'm thinking, awesome, Zane Parech's going to get the call-up. Instead, Canucks prospect Sawyer Minio. And I like Minio. I really do. I think he's a nice little prospect for Vancouver. 3rd round pick, playing in the WHL. When you have 2 top 10 picks ready to go, mind-blowing. Absolutely mind-blowing. And that's just the defense. Take a look at the offense. No Misa. No Crystal. Or Crystal, I believe is how you pronounce it. No Beckett Seneca, the 3rd overall pick. What are we doing, guys? It's just shocking. Why would you ever leave these players off? I can't even possibly fathom this. It was like, okay, with Team Canada for the Four Nations Cup, there were some players where you look at them individually and you say, oh, I think this X player has more skill than X player. But you can say, okay, Canada might need some elite role-playing guys. It's the World Juniors. You bring your best players. You don't look for the role-playing guys. Do you think that that's what the States and Sweden did? No. They said, who are our best forwards? Who are our best defenders? Who are our best goaltenders? Let's bring those. That's what USA did. That's what Sweden did. That's what Finland did. No major notable snubs come to the top of your mind for any of those. For Canada, it wasn't just 1. It wasn't just 2. It was 5 or 6 egregious snubs. Egregious. Really deserved loss for Canada. And you know what sucks? They still could have won. They still could have won the whole thing. They absolutely could have. That's what's so frustrating about this, is that even with how poorly this roster was constructed, Team Canada was still good enough to come away with the win against US in the open round, against Czechia in the quarterfinals. Good enough. Horrible, horrible coaching decisions lead to the Team Canada being eliminated. I never want to see Dave Cameron behind the bench again. That was awful. So many things wrong with the coaching. It's almost hard to know where to start, but I'm going to start from the back end. After Canada was eliminated, Dave Cameron said that they didn't feel like they had done anything wrong. He'd do it all again if he could. You don't feel like you did anything wrong? You don't feel like you did anything wrong? Canada has 40 more penalty minutes than the next team. Kazakhstan, by the way, is the next team with 76 PIMs. Canada had, I believe it was 114, might have been 116. Close either way. What are we doing? Rein in your players. This is an open season. You can try and blame the officiating all you want. You go for it. If you want to sound like an idiot, go ahead and blame the officiating. Absolutely, go ahead. Make yourself sound like a fool. This is the same officiating every team got. I understand the IIHF has stricter rules. They aren't just stricter rules for Team Canada. These are stricter rules that every team has to adhere to, and only one team absolutely failed. Failed miserably. I'm not putting this on the players. I'm not going to put this on the players. I think the players, sure, there are some players that had bad performances. Dickinson looked awful. Easton Cowan looked awful. But I'm not going to put the blame on them. This blame rests on Hockey Canada and the coaching. Cameron says he has no regrets from the tourney. If you have no regrets from that tourney, then Hockey Canada has regrets hiring you. What? I'm struggling to find words that aren't expletives to properly, adequately describe my rage that I feel about the way that Canada was playing. I think the most frustrating part about this was the amount of practices that got canceled by Team Canada. They canceled 3 practices and a morning skate. What? 3 practices and a morning skate? What are you talking about? That's nearly a practice per game that you're canceling. Oh my god. And the reason he says his players have to have the day off from practicing? Oh, because they're very tired. They're very tired. Why are they tired, Dave Cameron? Why are they tired? These are the most elite athletes that Team Canada has to offer in a sport where this is supposed to be the best, most dominant country in the world. What do you mean they're tired? If they're tired, it's because of one of 2 reasons. A, the players all mysteriously are out of shape and not prepared for this tournament. Gee golly whiz, that sounds unlikely. Or B, these are some of the worst run practices ever. Seriously, are you bag skating them for 25 minutes a night? What do you mean they're so tired you have to cancel 3 practices? Unacceptable. Unacceptable is the only word that you could possibly use to describe Dave Cameron's performance as a head coach at these World Juniors. And unacceptable is the only possible word you could use to describe Hockey Canada's selection committee for these World Juniors. Carter George is pretty great, can't blame him. Yeah, I liked the Canadian goaltending selection. That's it. The practices getting it canceled was infuriating. And I think the most infuriating one wasn't even the practices, but it was the morning skate. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? You canceled the morning skate ahead of the game against Czechia? What are you talking about? Canada's the laughingstock of the world in this tournament right now. You lost to Latvia. You got hammered by the United States. Your rival came into your country, came into your capital, came into your building, and made you look pathetic. And you're going to cancel the morning skate ahead of an elimination playoff game because your player was tired. Sorry I keep doing this mocking voice. I'm disgusted with Canada. I love the World Juniors. And growing up, this was a tournament that you got excited for. You circled it on your calendar because it was going to be some of the most electric hockey possible. The last year we saw that was not last year, but the year before. When Connor Bedard was playing for the team, It wasn't just Bedard. There was a lot of other great players on that team. That was an electric World Cup. Oh my goodness. Edge of your seat every night. This World Cup not World Cup, World Juniors for Canada was abysmal. Seriously. Was there a single game where you felt like Team Canada played well? Was there a single game where you even feel like they played okay? Oh, Finland, 4-0. Okay. Yeah. All right, I'll give you one. Finland, 4-0. Good job. That's it. It's the only game. Canada, supposedly the best country in the sport, showed up for one game. That's on coaching. That's not on the players. As to the many fans sending Easton Cowan threats, you're pathetic. You're scum. You are pathetic. You're losers. You are. You're going into a kid's Instagram box to hate on him for a performance that's not his fault. Yeah, he was probably Canada's overall worst player at the tournament. Why? Why was he the worst player at the tournament? He shouldn't have been given the ice time he was given. There's players that were better deserving of it. Gavin McKenna held back in ice time. Canada did not put out Gavin McKenna. They did not utilize him whatsoever. Arguably best player in the whole tournament. You wouldn't know it. James Higgins, who is the United States versions of Gavin McKenna in the really young player, lighting the tournament on fire, got so much ice time because he deserved it. Gavin McKenna saw nothing. It was, the word deplorable comes to mind. No, seriously, it almost felt like a saboteur's job. Probably the worst coaching performance that comes to my mind in recent memory, where you can genuinely point to it and say, that's all on coaching. He couldn't rein in his players for discipline. He couldn't get the power play to be effective. The one thing I'll say for Dave Cameron is that this team looked great 5-on-5. Very few 5-on-5 goals given up. In fact, I don't think they gave up a 5-on-5 goal until the end of the United States game. But just really disappointing year for Canada. And again, the first year in the history of the tournament ever since they changed the way seeding works in 1993. It's the first time Canada has been eliminated in back-to-back quarterfinals. And it's also the first 2-year stretch in a 10-year span where Canada has not gotten a gold medal. It's tough. Really tough. Really let down by Team Canada. And yeah, I mean, there were some really bad individual performances by the players. I'm not going to say that there weren't. That 2-on-0 where Easton Cowan chose to shoot instead of send it to Bonk for the backdoor tap in quite possibly lost us the game. But again, one chance does not a whole game make. And at the end of the day, when your team shows up that unprepared and that unready to adjust to a team that on paper should be worse, that's on coaching. It is. And again, the coaching can only do with what they're given. And it was such a slap in the face to see how awesome Zeev Buium's looked at this tournament for the United States of America, because Zeev Buium, you want to know who his direct comparables were, and who, by the way, went one pick before him in the draft? Zane Prick. Pick before him, Carter Yakupchuk. Zeev Buium has looked amazing. Absolutely amazing for the States. Canada had not one but two options to have that player play for them, and they didn't want it. Just shocking. Shocking from Hockey Canada. I say fire that entire selection committee. Don't let them near any decisions for next year's team. Run it back next year, rinse and repeat. I'm going to start to wrap up the show here. If you guys have any questions, whether it has anything to do with Canucks hockey, whether it has anything to do with World Junior hockey, whether it has anything to do with any sorts of hockey, I will answer your questions in the chat. One final recap of the Canucks game, 4-3 shootout victory. Thatcher Demko leaves halfway through the game due to an injury that, according to head coach Rick Tocchet, was back spasms. Hopefully won't be long term. They get the much needed 2 points over Seattle, thus putting themselves back into a playoff spot. And I believe for the first time this year, both of my teams are in a playoff spot at once. Go Ottawa, go Vancouver. Love to see that. Canucks play tomorrow night against the Nashville Predators. I'm not actually certain if we are going to be covering that show on the Game Over Network, because unfortunately, last minute we had to back out of that one, and so I'm not sure if we'll be able to have that show on the channel or not. I can't confirm. However, 100%, when the Montreal Canadiens are visited by your Vancouver Canucks, that will be the one, the only Kaja doing the damage on the post-game show after that game. For tonight, overall, pretty solid performance by the Canucks. Definitely lots of things to be concerned about. The number one thing to be concerned about, of course, the injury to netminder Thatcher Demko. Overall, a pretty solid performance. It kind of did feel like the Seattle Kraken game of last time, where you were very happy with their performance outside of a stretch of a few minutes. Last game, of course, it was the last 5 minutes and overtime. This game, it was the first 10 minutes. Just was awful for Vancouver. But they turned it around. They had to find out a way to turn it around, and they did. Credit where it's due. Overall, come away with a much, much needed win against a divisional rival that is struggling on this year. One last look at the World Juniors. Canada eliminated. And let's take a look at the upcoming games for the World Juniors, because of course I believe there is more tomorrow. If I can possibly find it here. I think it wouldn't be that hard to find. There we go. Sweden and Finland versus USA and Czechia. That will be, sorry, not tomorrow. Those games will be on Saturday. Don't see a time zone listed for these, so I don't know the exact times, but Sweden and Finland versus United States and Czechia. I'm going to make my predictions here. Man, I really don't want to take the favorites, but that is who I feel is going to win both these games. I do think we're going to see a final of Sweden versus the United States of America and a bronze medal game of Finland versus Czechia. That's what I am expecting. That's what I am predicting. I really don't see Czechia beating the United States. I thought they looked pretty good against Canada, but I think the United States is head and shoulders better than Canada. It's going to take a big effort from the Czechs if they want to be able to take down the States. The other side, Sweden, Finland, that's a lot more of a coin flip, but I actually think there's a chance Sweden's the best team in this whole tournament. They've been unreal. Before I take off, let's take a look at some Canucks prospects. Tom Willander, he's been kind of overshadowed in this tournament because Axel Sandin Pellikka has been the #1 defenseman for Team Sweden, and he's gotten kind of all the praise and all the highlights. However, quietly, Tom Willander having a very nice tournament for Sweden. Looking like a really nice little prospect for the Canucks. Boston College, he's had a good year there. And again, he's been overshadowed by ASP, but he's been their second best defender. And when you're the second best defender on arguably the best team in the tournament and you're having a really solid game, not much to ask for, much more to ask for your Canucks prospect. I don't think you can ask much more out of Willander. He's played up to expectations, up to high expectations, mind you. So good job for Willander, and some positive Canucks news there. Always good to see the prospects succeeding. So I don't see any questions in the chat. I think that is where I shall wrap up the show. Once again, thank you guys very, very much for joining me on the show today. Canucks coming away with a shootout victory over the Seattle Kraken. They play tomorrow night, 7 p.m. Pacific, against the struggling Nashville Predators. So we'll see how they can do against the Preds in a game where they would really like to come out ahead with another 2-point victory. So once again, thank you so much for spending your evening with me after a solid Canucks victory against the Seattle Kraken. Always a fun one. And World Junior action continues on Saturday the 4th. That'll be fun as well. Thank you so much for tuning in, giving your support. Appreciate it. As always, thanks for watching, and good night.